Welcome to Catholic Views, where we get to know the faith and those who live it. I'm your host, Renee Kranz. On today's show, we will have Sonia Corbett on Zoom with us again. She was here about a year and a half ago, and she's such a great guest. She has a new book out called Love Heals, and because Bishop DeGrood loves love and loves God's love, we wanted to have her come on because this just seems to connect very well to our diocese, and it's something we all need, especially during Lent. So we have her on to talk about that. So stick around for that interview. First, we have some Biblical Bites with Dr. B.
Hello, Renee.
Hello, Dr. Bergwald.
What's today, Renee?
Today is the first Sunday of Lent.
Fantastic. So it is. Do you know what is typically, if not always, the gospel for the first Sunday of Lent?
I'm going to guess it's the temptation in the desert.
Why do you think that?
Because it seems to fit the beginning of Lent.
Yeah, that's excellent. Yes,
and if my memory serves.
You are correct. So, of course, we're in year C this year in the 3-year cycle of Sunday Mass readings. So year C is Luke's gospel. So we get Luke's account of the temptation in the desert. So I just want to talk sort of in generalities and then note a couple particular things.
Okay.
It's the three what are commonly called the synoptic gospels by scholars Matthew, Mark, and Luke that speak explicitly about the temptation in the desert. I don't think John addresses it. Mark is just a quick, it's pretty short. Matthew and Luke give us the more extended accounts of this temptation that we're familiar with, where Jesus goes into the desert for 40 days. He fasts, and then at the end of that time, Satan comes and tries to tempt him in 3 different ways.
Right.
Matthew and Luke, because they're writing with slightly different purposes in mind, they don't follow. There's slight differences in how they address it, but the content is all there. So they're very similar.
Okay.
By the way, just to be clear, they all ended the same way. Jesus is successful.
He's not tempted.
He's not tempted. Well, he is tempted. He didn't succumb to the temptations.
Right.
So, really interesting thing. So yes, this reading comes at the beginning of Lent because we are entering into our 40-day time, and I think some things to think about. So, Renee, any idea do you recall when in the context of Jesus's life, what happened right before the temptation? What happens after the temptation? Do you remember that by chance?
Right before is his baptism.
Correct.
And right after is when John the Baptist dies, isn't it?
Ish. I mean, it kind of, yeah.
So I don't know. I don't
but
know
what
if
about with Jesus?
Maybe wedding at Cana.
That's interesting because that wedding at Cana is in John. Alone, and since John doesn't really have the temptation narrative, it's not clear. So, especially in Luke's account, so Jesus begins his public ministry.
Okay.
In Luke's gospel, after the temptation, he goes to Nazareth, opens the scroll from I think Isaiah about and what's going to happen in the year of Jubilee, and Jesus, and now this reading has been fulfilled in your hearing. So baptism, then temptation, then public ministry. So Jesus' baptism and the temptation, the time in the desert, are both a time of preparation. That's all preparing him for his public ministry, which will, of course, culminate in Jerusalem, Holy Week, with the Paschal mystery, his passion, death, and resurrection.
Right. It's really interesting to me that he didn't need to actually do either the baptism or the temptation. He's God. He didn't need to do either of those things.
So here's the interesting thing. So it parallels Israel's experience after in the Exodus.
Sure.
They go through the Red Sea, a baptism, if you will. And then they ended up spending 40 years wandering in the desert. The thing I want to note here, just in the minute and a half or so we have left, though, I want to get specific. So there's that parallel with the history of Israel, but where Israel screwed it up, of course, Jesus does not.
Right.
But Luke begins his account of the temptation this way. So this is right after the baptism, chapter 4, verse 1 and following. Filled with the Holy Spirit, Jesus returned from the Jordan and was led by the Spirit into the desert for 40 days to be tempted by the devil. So this emphasis on the role of the Spirit is definitely present. I think Mark puts it, Jesus was driven by the Spirit into the desert. So Jesus is filled with the Holy Spirit. He returns from the Jordan where he's baptized, and he's led by the Spirit, or as Mark puts it, driven by the Spirit into the desert for 40 days. So I think, just the modeling for us of Jesus' experience in going into his 40 days in the desert. He's full of the Spirit and he's led by the Spirit. I know for me, so often, especially like with my Lenten resolutions, I decide. And for years I've said, you should discern. I should discern. But in the end, I decide what I'm going. And my Lenten experience is driven by me rather than by the Spirit. So I think we should turn to the Holy Spirit instead.
Yeah, great idea. Thanks, Dr. B.
You bet.